welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports Network. That's Danny Kanell, that's Bud Elliott. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live for the next hour, getting you set for week 1 in the Big Ten. This is going to be just a thing to flag on your calendar, circle it, set a meeting for noon Eastern time on Tuesdays, because we are going to have you rocking and rolling with game breakdowns, latest news, analysis, and so much more each and every week on CBS Sports Network. Now today, obviously, we've got our hands full. Why? Because we've got a massive matchup with the reigning champion Ohio State Buckeyes as they welcome in the number 1 team in the country, the Texas Longhorns. We'll be giving you a tale of the tape, the storylines, the matchups, and of course some game picks, plus taking a look at UCLA hosting Utah, the Nebraska-Cincinnati matchup in Arrowhead. And before we get out of here, we will give you a player to watch for the weekend in the Big Ten. Before we get into tale of the tape, DK, Bud, Danny first, what is it like to go into a college football season, a week 1, and to have a matchup of this magnitude, Ohio State hosting Texas?
I love it. I do think it's one of the things that really helps these coaches in training camp to get their team pretty fine-tuned and focused on a huge game. Like sometimes when you have an easier opponent, they might have a tendency to look ahead, and you hear the coaches say that sometimes we can't overlook our first opponent. You don't have to worry about that at all with either one of these teams overlooking the opponent. This has been circled all season long as a significant matchup, and it also allows you to game plan a little bit more specifically, have a little bit more of an enhanced game plan with a little extra time to prepare for them, throw some new wrinkles at them. So I cannot wait for this matchup, just like all of college football fans across the country, and I think it's going to be an all-time banger.
Totally agree with DK. I mean, both teams have to come out here. They have to throw their fastball. You really can't hold anything back. A lot of teams we see kind of load manage early in the year. They play all these, lesser level teams. This is big boy ball on day 1. All these players know each other. Ohio State recruits against Texas quite frequently. They're all at the same elite camps. They've all kind of grown up, being on the camp circuit and the 7-on-7 circuit. So, what a fun game. A bunch of elite athletes. I'm ready to watch this.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because we discussed that with in-state rivalries, right? The guys that went to high school together, it's always familiar. But the very few that are in that upper tier of recruiting, yeah, they all know each other too. They've all been on the visits. They've all been through the camps, as you mentioned. Another cool angle that we have right here. Okay, on to tale of the tape. We have gone through and we have identified 6 different categories that we are going to be comparing when it comes to Ohio State and Texas: the quarterbacks, the running backs, the wide receivers, the offensive line, the defense, and the coaching. And thanks to our stellar team behind the scenes, we're going to be able to update this in real time. So let's have the debate. I'll let our resident quarterback weigh in second here. Bud, as you look at Arch Manning on one side, Julian Sayin on the other, Manning clearly with a lot more experience, though not much more in competitive action. Who do you think has the edge when it comes to Texas and Ohio State at the quarterback position?
Sure, Chip. So based on the recruiting profiles, it's hard to go wrong here picking either guy. I'm going to pick Arch Manning because I think he has a lot more athleticism than Julian Sayin does. And in an early season matchup, they both have great pedigrees, totally agree. But look, early season matchup, what did we see in Ireland with Kansas State, Iowa State? You see protection breakdown. You see guys having to scramble around, make plays with their legs. I think it's Arch Manning here because of his legs, because of a little bit more experience in some real games. Sayin might be a stud. We have seen some flashes from Arch that makes me want to go with Arch.
Yeah, I think some people could even accuse, well, you're just going with Arch Manning. He's the bigger name, but we have at least seen him play, right? I mean, that's at least we've seen him out there, and sometimes been good and other times it wasn't. Remember, he did come in against Georgia at home, didn't look great. Neither quarterback looked great for Texas that game, but at least he's been in that environment, and we know he's able to go out there and operate in some hostile circumstances. Also had some snaps in other key games across last season, something we haven't seen from Julian Sayin. I do think, if you paired it with some of the other pieces around there, I think maybe it gets tighter, but I think it's Arch Manning. Also compared when Julian Sayin having a new coordinator, potentially Brian Hartline calling the plays with Ryan Day. Arch's familiarity with Sark's system, I think, puts him over the edge. So I'll go with Arch as well.
Yeah, I've mentioned this before, but Arch Manning has been a member of the Texas football program for 30 months. He has been working with Steve Sarkisian for 2.5 years. Like he should have the edge here. No pushback from me on this one. Now we get to a little bit of an interesting discussion because on the Texas side at the running back position, we've got some players that we have seen at times, but they haven't all been healthy together. Your C.J. Baxter, Contravius Wisner. Then on the Ohio State side, you're replacing Quinshon Judkins. You're replacing Travion Henderson, two huge pieces to that national title run. When we're trying to give an edge at the running back position, how would you look at that, DK, and how would you break that down?
I'd give the slight edge to Texas in this one as well. You mentioned the losses that they had at Ohio State. It is such a big void when you lost, the two all-star running backs last year in Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. C.J. Baxter's another player back to being full health. Like, he was pretty special when he was healthy. I think he's really going to bump up that one. And you mentioned Trey Wisner, who's another one. I think we at least know what he can give us, and he's been out there as a pretty consistent performer for the Texas Longhorns. So I'll go with the running back edge to the Texas Longhorns.
I think I'm going to agree with Danny here ever so slightly. None of these rooms stand out as being special relative to the talent overall on both of these rosters. I think Texas probably has some more upside, especially if Baxter is a guy who's back to full health. Give me the Longhorns here ever so slightly, but I'm not really sure running backs make the difference in this game.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that. Let's make it a clean sweep. We'll go Texas at quarterback. We got Texas at running back. Now, Bud, before we go to offensive line, I think that we've got, so we're keeping an eye on some injury status, some availabilities, a lot of questions surrounding this game, obviously, which will be decided at the lines of scrimmage. I got thoughts about Ohio State as well, but I don't want to step on your toes. As you're looking at the offensive line in particular, what stands out in terms of being really important in this matchup?
Well, Chip, I think you mentioned it. It's health, right? We've already see that Texas lost Andre Kojo, who was in contention to be their starting right tackle this year. Now Trevor Gooseby has been battling an injury. Now, Steve Sarkisian, the Texas head coach, did say he expects him to play. He also said something extremely similar last year about their starting left tackle, Kelvin Banks, who did not end up playing against Georgia there in the SEC title game. So do we take Sark at his word? I personally don't trust any of these coaches when it comes to injury reports. Now, when the official one comes out, which I don't know if we'll have because it's a non-conference game, so a lot of schools don't release them for non-conference games. They keep it to conference games only. But if he doesn't play, that's a major red flag here for Texas because teams don't have four good tackles. They're already down Kojo. I think Baker and Gooseby could be an excellent combo if Gooseby's healthy. But if for some reason he's limited or doesn't play, then I think it's all hands on deck for the Longhorns. Ohio State, pretty talented, maybe not amazingly talented. They do return, some important guys there. They went out and added a tackle in the transfer portal from Rice. But I think this is, if healthy, advantage Texas. But to me, it's kind of a push if not. That's not really helping Mikey make this chart, though.
DK, what you got?
I think this one's probably the toughest one. I think it's probably the closest to a draw that I could come across. They both have significant pieces across the board. I'll give it ever so slightly to Ohio State, a little bit more experience, and the fact that they're playing at home. That's where I go with the edge because I do think it's pretty even. They both have a lot of talent across the offensive lines, but the ability to have the crowd noise not as loud when you're operating on the offensive side of the ball, I'll give it to Ohio State.
Great point. And I'll just go ahead and push this all the way over. I was ready to say Ohio State. And it's funny because it ties back to looking at Arch Manning and giving him the advantage because of his mobility. I think he will need that mobility because of what they could be facing along the Texas offensive line. Some of the camp buzz that we have heard from Ohio State is that after a season where Ryan Day felt like he had to mix and match all the different pieces and they were constantly trying to battle injuries and find the right five, they feel like they are healthier and deeper along the offensive line than they have been in quite some time. Like Bud mentioned, you're not rolling out a lot of names that are getting on the preseason All-America hype, but as a unit, I think that the Joe Moore Award and similar type honors could be coming for this Ohio State group. I like this Ohio State group. I think it is a strength of the offense. So while quarterback and running back we are giving to Texas, I am going to take the offensive line. And in it sort of, as we're looking at a draw, I'll go ahead and push that all the way over to the Ohio State side. Okay, DK, wide receiver. This one's tough, right? This one's really tough. What are we going to do?
No, but I actually think it's closer. I mean, I'm going to give it to Ohio State because
Ooh.
they have Jeremiah Smith, but I will be, reminding people that in the playoff game last year, Jeremiah Smith was held in check pretty well by the Texas Longhorns defense, but he is a freak, and he does have Carnell Tate alongside him as well, and it has become wide receiver U with our now play caller, Brian Hartline, doing a phenomenal job there as well. So you throw in Brandon Innes and a tight end who's really good as well. I do think Ohio State gets the edge, but I do think it's closer than people think. Remember, Ryan Wingo is a speedster on the outside. DeAndre Moore is pretty good. They've got a slew of young players. So I think it's closer than people may think, but I absolutely have to go with Ohio State because of that guy right there on your screen, who is about maybe the most dominant player in college football.
Are we counting tight ends here as well?
Ooh, you can do Max Clare for Ohio State as a way to sort of like even or take it over the top potentially.
I think if we count tight ends, this is a big advantage for Ohio State. I think Carnell Tate, who is pretty clearly the two for the Buckeyes, would be Texas's number one, maybe with a bullet. I think Max Clare was the best tight end in the transfer portal. Reading bucknuts.com, feel like they do a great job for us on 24/7 Sports Network. Feel like the word out of camp has been extremely positive about all these receivers, and especially the feedback on Clare has been fantastic. Not too many times we're going to say Texas doesn't have the receiver advantage this year if we do this, but Ohio State here to me is a pretty clear advantage at the spot.
I agree. I mean, I'm going to give this to Ohio State as well. And if we want to count the tight ends as a pass catchers category, Bud, how about the loss of Gunnar Helm? Because between Matthew Golden and Gunnar Helm, you're losing a lot from the pass catching group from last year. Isaiah Bond's gone. And yeah, I agree with you, Danny. Ryan Wingo, DeAndre Moore are two fantastic young talents, but still we're talking about a world when it comes to Jeremiah Smith. All right, what about the defensive side of the ball? I'm sure Tom Fornelli's yelling at us somewhere that we're trying to group all of defense into just one category. but Bud, which way would you go for the defense in terms of trying to give an edge?
Well, I think both teams have really experienced secondaries, but I'm going to go with Texas here. I think Texas has many more impact defensive linemen than Ohio State does. Colin Simmons off the edge is absolutely nasty. I think Texas linebackers are super freaky athletic. I'm going to go to advantage Texas here. I think their defense is not by a lot, but somewhat discernibly better than the Buckeyes.
I'm in agreement with Bud. I'll go with Texas as well. Colin Simmons had such a breakout season last year as a freshman. You got Michael Taft in the secondary coming back, and Caleb Downs is no slouch in the secondary, maybe one of the best secondary players in the country. But as a group, I think you've got to give the edge to Texas. The defensive line that Bud mentioned, not only Colin Simmons, but also in the middle, getting a couple portal guys to help shore up the interior of that one. Really solid linebacker play as well. I think both of these defenses are really good, but I think you've got to give the edge to Texas.
Yeah, clean sweep, more freaks that I know. You mentioned Anthony Hill, Colin Simmons, just guys that are going to be that have always been jumping off the screen and making plays. So yeah, I'm going to say edge Texas on the defensive side. Now comes the fun one. If you're watching on CBS Sports Network, you see that the last one is coaching. One of these coaches has a national championship ring. One of these coaches has an absolutely bananas win-loss record. And yet, I still think this is a little bit of a debate. Now, for the purposes of our discussion, I will say that I approach this as not just head coach, but coaching staff. So that might tip where I'm leaning, but DK, you get first word.
Man, this one's tough. And there's a lot of question marks with Ohio State having to replace both coordinators. I'm going to go with Ohio State. Again, some of this comes back to having been there and done that. And I think Ryan Day probably was one of the most disrespected coaches for the last few years, even by his own fan base, who was ready to fire him after that fourth loss to Michigan. But he's shown the ability to overcome, coordinator changes before. I know they lose their defensive coordinator who goes off to Penn State. I think Matt Patricia is a pretty qualified candidate to replace them. We've seen, more coaches coming from the NFL, coming to the college ranks and having success. Brian Hartline is new, but I also think that could be more Ryan Day on the offensive side of the ball, where last year it was kind of Chip Kelly's offense. This year, I think it's much more collaborative, and Brian Hartline is familiar with the system. He's been there. So I'm going to give the slight edge in totality to Ohio State.
I'm going to go with Texas slightly, but again, I don't think this is like a slam dunk in either direction. If you sat them down, it's like, all right, like none of these guys suck, or they're all really, really good coaches. If you told me it was Day and not Hartline, I think I might go Ohio State. So like Danny, you may be right on that, but like to me, there's a reason Hartline was passed over for the job in the past, right? And that's because like inexperience, hasn't been a play caller at this level before. Sark's an excellent play caller. I think staff continuity is going to push this to Texas as well. Like same offensive line coach, right? Like really same entire staff. So Sark has had some of the lowest turnover rates on his staff in the country. So I'm going to go edge Texas here in coaching.
Yeah, we've been dealing with almost a half decade of the Texas coaching brain trust staying together. I think that matters in a matchup like this. Week 1, I'll be the tiebreaker here. I'm going to push this over to a coaching edge for the Texas Longhorns for our tale of the tape here on the Cover 3 podcast. Now, we'll be doing the expert picks in a little bit, but just to review the tale of the tape, we are saying Texas edge quarterback, Texas edge running back, Ohio State edge offensive line, Ohio State edge wide receiver, Texas edge defense, and coaching edge Texas as well. Now, does that mean that we are picking Texas to win? Not necessarily, but coming up on the other side, we turn our attention to the matchups to watch, expert picks, game predictions, and more. Next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network, continuing our look at the Spotlight Top 5 game between Texas and Ohio State in Columbus on Saturday. We gave you our tale of the tape. Now let's go inside the matchup, big game breakdown style. But as you look at the way these two teams are lining up, and we've already discussed some of the ways the different sides compare against each other, but I don't know if you know this about football, but the running backs don't play the running backs and the wide receivers don't play the wide receivers. So as they line up on the field, how do you see the big matchup pivot points between the Buckeyes and the Longhorns?
Again, does Texas have a plan to stop Jeremiah Smith? They kind of stopped him there in the Cotton Bowl that we were at, but ultimately Ohio State still found a way to score with screen passes, throwing the balls to other receivers. I believe Kanell Tate was the leading receiver in that ball game. I just have a hard time getting away from the fact that like Ohio State literally has a guy who would be a top 10 receiver in the NFL playing college football, and they have him for 2 more years. And like I don't want to be reductive and boil it down to just one guy, but I just think you have to give him so much attention, and they have multiple other NFL picks at receiver. So yes, Texas had more edges in the matchup edges, but I think the size of this edge might be enough to get it done for Ohio State. So to me, how does Texas match up with Jeremiah Smith and the other stud receivers like Kanell Tate and Max Clare at tight end that the Buckeyes possess?
Yeah, that to me is a huge storyline. And they did stop him, as you mentioned, with 1 catch for 3 yards in that playoff game, but everybody else was able to go off. Like, that's what happens. And this is what can be the great advantage of having Jeremiah Smith. Sure, he might have a quiet day, but what does it take to keep him quiet? It takes dedicated multiple defenders, a safety shaded over the top, a bracket coverage, anywhere he is on the field, kind of always being a distractor. And guess what that takes away from? Your ability to stop everybody else, including the run game. So I do think he is that dynamic playmaker. And I know they have Jack Sawyer and others on the defensive side of the ball, but they still have Caleb Downs, who's one of the more dominant secondary players. Look at the impact plays that he's made in these big games for them too. So I also think that the storyline, as far as like what's in play here, home field. I mean, the line tells you this is essentially a pick'em game, but there is an advantage to playing in your backyard. Now, how much is it worth? Are they going to cover the spread? I don't know, but I do think that's why I'm leaning towards the Buckeyes in this one. That home crowd should be wild. It should be crazy. With younger quarterbacks, it's harder to operate at the line of scrimmage. With younger offensive linemen that haven't played as much, it's more challenging to communicate, to hear your quarterback make the calls. So I think that's a huge part of this storyline as well.
We spent a lot of time last year, once we got deeper into the season, we acknowledged that Texas was a good team, right? But then we started to really hold their resume, under the microscope. We were like, who have they beaten right? It was a little bit of a debate. We knew they were good. All the data told us that, but now I'm thinking back and I'm like, all right, Steve Sarkisian, what are his best wins as Texas's head coach? You've seen a lot of impressive performances, maybe in defeat, right? You think about Washington. You think about maybe the defeat to the Ohio State last year when they were marching, trying to tie the game before Jack Sawyer runs it back the other way for a touchdown. But then I remembered a couple of events. Number one, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, taking Texas into the big house, kind of outclassing them early and being able to put the game away. Number two, going into Tuscaloosa and being able to walk out with the win. Can this Texas team be road warriors like they have been in the past? Is there something to that coaching continuity that we've talked about where they've had the same group together, that they know what buttons to push and the ways to get them mentally ready? Because these are two phenomenally talented teams, rightly rated as national championship contenders. It's an X factor for me without a doubt, but an X factor that says, if Texas has done this, gone into somebody else's house and been able to come out with a win, are they going to be able to do it again against the Buckeyes? I would definitely take Ohio State over the Michigan team they beat. Maybe a little bit of a wash with the Alabama team that they took down, but still something that is in that track record for Steve Sarkisian and this staff where I'm thinking, it's not nothing, right? It's not nothing.
What was the constant in those two road wins? Quinn Ewers balled out in both of them. Yeah, he played great. And I hear way too many people, and Arch Manning long-term, like potential-wise, clearly has more upside than Quinn Ewers. But that's the one thing we don't know yet is how he's going to play. And you got exceptional play. I remember watching the game against Michigan thinking, man, this guy looks like a first-round pick. He had some spectacular plays on the run, moving around a little bit. Bama, 3 touchdown passes, including a beautiful, bloop rainbow throw down there, touchdown to close it out. I think that's the one unknown for me, and that's what they've gotten from Quinn Ewers, and we don't know yet if we're going to get that from Arch Manning.
All right, now let's put it to it. Before we get out of here, we got to give them a pick, right? I mean, naturally, for our locks, you can come catch those on Thursday at youtube.com/cover3 or wherever you get your podcast. But just as a general thought, who you think's going to win, who you got, DK, I'll let you go first.
I might have already given it away. I'm going Ohio State as the defending national champion, and I do think home field matters so much. The one, unknown is Julian Sayin, and it could be bumpy. It's been bumpy in the past for some of their younger quarterbacks early out of the gate, but I do feel like having the most difference, the biggest difference maker on the field, Jeremiah Smith. Potentially, I think Colin Simmons might have a say about, the defense, who's the biggest difference maker, but Ohio State does have Caleb Downs too. I'm going to lean towards Ohio State. I'm going to pick them.
I'm going to go Ohio State as well because of Jeremiah. There's certainly a possibility that Arch just balls out and plays at a level that Sayin can't get to. And, maybe that Texas edge rushers just give Ohio State problems all day. But I'm going to make Texas stop Jeremiah again. I'm going Ohio State because of the receivers and the pass catchers.
I'm going the other way, gentlemen. I cannot get out of my head DeAndre Moore, the Texas wide receiver, and I've mentioned this on the podcast. They asked him at the beginning of fall camp what the difference in quarterback was, and his quote was something along the lines of, it's like going from baby wheels to super wheels. And so I think Super Wheels ends up being the star of the day. Give me Arch Manning balling out and Texas pulling off the big upset. But we're fired up. We got, of course, our best bets and different ways to attack it coming up later in the week on Locks. But coming up on the other side, our big game breakdown tour continues as we go to a Pac-12 rivalry renewed. What to expect for the Nico Iamaleava era at UCLA. Devin Dampier taking over at Utah. The Utes, the Bruins. What to know and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network, as we continue our preview for some of the biggest games in the Big Ten coming up in week 1. Let's turn our spotlight to the Night Owls. That's right, 11 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff, 8 local, as we've got a Pac-12 rivalry renewed. Utah down in the Rose Bowl to take on UCLA. It's year 2 for Deshaun Foster with the Bruins, but year 1 with Nico Iamaleava at quarterback. Before we get to the Nico of it all and the quarterback battle, Bud, on the Cover 3 podcast, you've been keeping us apprised of a lot of the UCLA eligibility, injury watch, status updates. So I'll let you get first word here before we dive into the quarterback battle. Now, what is the latest and what should people know about UCLA and its efforts to be as healthy and eligible as possible for week 1?
Yeah, Chips, I think if you're looking to maybe place a wager on this one, or at least figure out like how late into the night you want to watch this, UCLA's receiver, several of them have been dinged up lately. Kind of want to watch pregame warmups, maybe stay tuned to Twitter or the pregame coverage or whatever your preferred method there is, figuring out those guys are going to play. But UCLA made major upgrades in the offseason on offense, but they do need these receivers healthy to play. Otherwise, this could be over quickly.
All right, now let's take it to the quarterback side of this, which DK, we got to go to you. Nico Iamaleava takes over as the leader of this Bruins offense. He's also got Tino Sunseri as the new offensive coordinator there. So DK, what are your expectations for Nico here in week 1 against a Utah defense that we do expect to be one of the more challenging units to face there in the Big 12?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the one thing that they would love to give Nico is a run game. They were 132nd in the country in rushing last year, which is pretty astounding considering their coach is a former running back. You think they would have run the ball a little bit better. And I'm excited to see what Tino Sunseri brings to the table. I thought he did a masterful job at Indiana, scheming guys open, getting guys open, easier throws for a quarterback. But I think you'll see a version of Nico that was similar to what we saw last year. I think you'll see flashes of brilliance. He's got the capability to do that. He can make plays with his legs as well if he needs to, if he does get in trouble. So I would expect Nico to come out with a pretty strong performance in week 1. And I think it's a clear upgrade from what they've been working with, because last year they did not get great quarterback play. I don't think it was going to get much better with Joey Aguilar. So I think they're really excited about Nico and what they're trying to build around him.
Bud's eyes just got so big. I mean, Bud, I got to get you to elaborate here on the upgrade that we're seeing from the Bruins. What do you think that will be in place? What do you think that offense is going to look like?
I mean, outside of Nebraska, did anybody else in the country upgrade their offensive coordinator position more than UCLA? I don't really think so. That was not a real serious operation last year, in my opinion. And I think they've upgraded in a major way. They brought in several transfers in the offensive line. We'll see how those guys play. Some of them are backups at other schools, but who knows? Change of scenery, maybe a new spot. Defensively, I'm a little bit worried about some of the pass rush stuff here. Obviously, we see the graphic on screen here showing how much talent UCLA has to replace every starter in the secondary. And Utah will be a major challenge, guys. Utah has one of the best offensive lines in the country. They have a system, I think, that is really easy to install quickly. They took a lot of key transfers there. And Utah was my pick to win the Big 12 this year, despite having a terrible season last year, mostly due to quarterback injury. So UCLA, I think, will be way improved on offense. I hope that they didn't miss their window of having a good defense, because last year, their defense was actually kind of salty and played really hard for Coach Foster.
All right, let's look at the Utah side of this. Bud, you first. We've got Devin Dampier. We've got Jason Beck. We've got another situation similar to what we have at Oklahoma, where you've got a quarterback, but you're also taking the coordinator. So what do you think it's going to look like now that Utah has, as far as we know right now, a healthier quarterback situation than they've had in probably 3 years?
Yeah, so if you look at kind of what Virginia did during that COVID year when they were putting the points up on everybody, that's kind of what I think you're going to expect to see out of this offense. Maybe a little bit less passing than Brennan Armstrong did with Virginia, but Dampier can chuck it around a little bit. He also can run around quite well. A lot of misdirection, a lot of motion. I think Jason Beck is a tremendous offensive coordinator hire for Utah. Wayshawn Parker, the running back transfer they took from Washington State, is an excellent player. I had him on my fantasy team last year when I won our league. So, I really enjoyed watching him score all those touchdowns for Wazoo. My one question with this Utah offense is I'm not really sure that they're anything special at receiver. I get all the pre-draft lists, and I'm not really seeing anybody who makes a real difference there at receiver for Utah. But if the run game is as good as I think it might be, plus Dampier's legs added in, plus Wayshawn Parker, you're going to get a lot of one-on-one matchups for these receivers to exploit, especially with the help of Jason Beck's play calling.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's why they went and tackled the Porter. They've got 3 transfer wide receivers penciled in to start for the Utes. Dampier's very interesting because he is a dynamic player. I mean, the thing that jumps out to you is, yes, he was pretty solid throwing the football, had some yards, but being an 1,100-yard rusher with the football does make him a difference maker. And I think they're going to lean on his legs a lot. The one thing to be cautious of, and I'm sure that Beck has talked to him about it, was the touchdown to interception ratio. 12-12 is not something that jumps out to you in any way impressive for him. In fact, it would make you concerned. He's got to be careful with the football because I think Utah, I think this is exactly what Kyle Whittingham would want, is a quarterback who can extend drives with his legs, but the one thing he does not want to see is a quarterback who turns the ball over. So just something to keep an eye on, but I think it'll help that he has a better defense and better players around him. You mentioned the running back room. It's deep with portal players as well, but I do think they're going to really try to establish the run game around Dampier's legs.
Yeah, Utah fans are probably telling themselves that those interceptions happened because New Mexico was having to overcome a bad defense, right? You know, there was a lot of force it. There was a lot of YOLO that was sort of the pressure of the moment. You don't have to worry about that when you've got that Utah defense on the other side. So hopefully the decision-making, if you're a Utah fan, is what you're looking for. All right, one last thing here before we hit a break and jump into the Nebraska-Cincinnati showdown, which is one of the best games that we're going to get on Thursday night. What, Danny, defines success for Deshaun Foster in year 2? They've got a win total of 5.5. But as you think about what we saw last year and what they've got in place, what does a UCLA fan want to see from on the field this season from Deshaun Foster's squad?
I think they want to see a more consistent team, a team that is more competitive in most of their games this season. I think they want to see a team that goes bowling. Like, I think that's a step in the right direction to go over that win total and to avoid games like they had at home last year against Indiana, which was one of the first games out of the gate, but Indiana went in there and absolutely stomped them. So you want to win the games you're supposed to and maybe sneak up and win a couple ones that you're not supposed to. And the schedule is manageable early. And that's why this game, I think, is so huge for UCLA. You know, playing at home, it's an opportunity for them to start 1-0. Then they've got 3 very winnable games. So if they could somehow pull off the upset here, I think it would be huge and it would be a step in the right direction. But I also thought this locker room, which Deshaun Foster could have lost last year, they got better as the season wore on and they got used to him. We saw the exodus of players as well. Maybe there's some players that weren't buying into his philosophy, weren't, really responding to his coaching style. Now they've weeded some of those out, bringing more players in to do it, made a lot of changes on the coaching staff. So I would expect this team to make that step forward. I think UCLA fans would want to see at least a bowl and maybe even 7 wins.
By the way, just got a text. My guy at UCLA does think those guys are going to play. So let's go. Entertaining game. Yeah.
Hey, breaking news on CBS Sports Network.
Look, they're just having their coffee over there on the West Coast, right? Noon here, but like 9:30 there. So I think if they play, we have real shootout potential here.
Okay. What about Deshaun Foster year 2? What's sort of your thought on that?
I think if your win total is 5.5, that's pretty manageable. Making a bowl game, I think, would go a long way for this team. More cohesion on offense, a real plan on offense. And I want to see, like, Deshaun took so much progression last year as a head coach. That opening game against Hawaii was a disaster. I mean, we were on our group chats like, guys, this may not work. And he got so much better as a head coach where I thought he was a real value add as a coach maybe in the latter third of the season. I want to see his team continue to fight really hard for them. And maybe, like, I know the guy is a decent recruiter. Like if you get more product on the field to sell, he can start upgrading the talent up and down that roster.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. The teams that don't quit earn our hearts, okay? It's just the way that we are as college football fans on the Cover 3 podcast. Okay, so this will be, again, 11 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff. That means It's a great second screen to the primary screen of our instant reaction show, which will get rocking and rolling around 11:30 p.m. Eastern time. YouTube.com/cover3 for the uninitiated. It's one of our favorite shows that we do every single week, trying to, as best as we can, recap an entire day of action in one show, 11:30 p.m. Eastern time. Again, getting started shortly after kickoff for UCLA and Utah. But coming up on the other side, we go from late night Saturday to Thursday night, because we've got Nebraska and Cincinnati in Arrowhead Stadium. Storylines, matchups to watch, and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, continuing to look at some of the biggest matchups in the Big Ten coming up in week 1, and it is a massive non-conference showdown for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. They will be playing in Arrowhead Stadium, the home of the Kansas City Chiefs, against Cincinnati from the Big 12. Now, we saw last year a good step forward in the Matt Rule era. And for Dylan Raiola, there were some ups, there were some downs. Danny, we got a chance to speak with Dylan at Big Ten Media Days, and we've certainly had our eyes on the Cornhuskers as they go into a year when we typically see Matt Rule's programs take a big jump. So as you look at this first matchup against Cincinnati, what are some of the things you're looking for on the Nebraska side of things?
Well, I want to see what this offense looks like with Dana Holgorsen now. And I do appreciate the fact that Matt Rule last year just ripped the Band-Aid off. Could tell it wasn't working. Dylan Raiola was really struggling in the back end of the season. And I think one of the advantages of making that move was you got to have some sort of in-game feel with Dana Holgorsen and Dylan Raiola, working together. And it was interesting when we talked to him, he told us, hey, it was kind of weird. I had to learn new plays, new concepts during the season, which is pretty rare, but at least you got that out of the way. And so now you're more familiar with each other. You've had an entire offseason. They've spent a lot of time together getting familiar with Dana Holgorsen and his ability to be an offensive game planner. I think this is one of the more significant coordinator moves that we've seen across the country, pairing these two together. And I would expect Dylan Raiola to take that big step forward. I mean, last year he started off so strong, and then the back end of the season really started to struggle, in large part because the offensive line struggled as well, but they've gone out, tried to address that. They go get Rocco Spindler in the portal, try to upgrade the position there, a couple portal guys in the offensive line. They realized the importance of giving him better protection, because that was really when he struggled, was when the protection broke down, started to make worse decisions with the football. But I think they'll do a better job protecting him, and I think Dana Holgorsen will do a better job scheming up some plays for him.
Danny, totally agree. I think Nebraska's offense is going to be way improved this year. You get Raiola year 2. You go out and make some major additions there in the transfer portal, including receiver Dane Key. I think the offensive line should probably take a pretty good step up. Again, I think this is the most improved coordinator position in the entire country. I thought their old OC was really not befitting a power conference program, and Holgorsen can really call some ball plays. So you get a quarterback with sky high potential. You get some receivers who can really run. Finally, Barney's a pretty good player. We know Key has some serious juice. If the offensive line can take that step, I think Nebraska is going to score on pretty much everybody in the country. Defensively, I do have some questions here. I think it's fair to question. You lose coordinator Tony White, who's very accomplished, to a Florida State team that went 2-10. So what happened there? Not totally sure. But my guess here is if you're a guy who's going to be in line for a head coaching job, you stick around, keep doing a good job. You don't leave for a 2-10 Florida State team unless you realize some of the players Nebraska lost on defense were actually pretty important. So for me, major questions on the defensive line for Nebraska. Some more confidence there, I think, in the back seven. We'll have to see how it shapes up. They can maybe hide those deficiencies if they, in fact, are deficiencies.
So offensively for Cincinnati, Brendan Sorsby's a very, very good player. They got a couple good running backs. I think we might have a pretty decent ground game, but for a Nebraska fan who might be listening or watching along right now, but what should they expect from Cincinnati in terms of ways that the Bearcats might be able to have some success in this game?
That classic Scott Satterfield zone running game like he had dating back to his days at App State. I think the receiver room here has been totally rebuilt, and maybe in a positive way, so that Jeff Caldwell, an FCS transfer they got, can really, really fly. We'll see what Caleb Goody looks like. Cyrus Allen, who was banged up at Louisiana Tech. They lost their top 6 receivers from last year, But I do think there's a chance that maybe, just maybe, they don't have a drop off there. Offensive line loses 4 of the top 5, but going to the transfer portal, they feel like they're okay there. I agree with you, Chip. I think Sorsby is a pretty good quarterback, especially for that league of the Big 12. And like, this might be new versus new. Who can get it together sooner in this game that decides it? That is the Cincinnati offensive line against that rebuilt Nebraska defensive line.
I do think there's room for improvement, though, for Sorsby. I mean, his numbers are pretty good, struggles somewhat with interception bug against some of the better opponents, similar to what we were talking about with Dylan Raiola. When he gets pressured, maybe he's a tendency to cough the ball up or give it to the other team. You mentioned the receivers, not just the starters. They added 5 new guys through the portal to try to give him some options there at receiver. So I do think he can take another step forward as a quarterback if Cincinnati wants to get to a bowl game or higher this season. But this is a big test for them early, playing out at Arrowhead. I love this matchup.
Snap call here. Who do you think ends up winning this game? Can Nebraska win as the favorite, DK?
I think they should, but I do think this is like a plucky opponent. That's kind of one of those ones. They've got nothing to lose. It could be their signature win of the season. There's massive pressure and expectations on Nebraska, on Dylan Raiola. Don't forget about the Godfather, Dante Corleone, a tough interior defensive lineman for Cincinnati that likes to talk big game. Cincinnati's going to come in and give it their best effort, but I do think Nebraska's got the better totality as a roster. I think they're a step ahead.
I'm going to go ahead and call for the upset here. I think Cincinnati has a shot to shock the world. If you recall, Cincinnati lost its top 3 defensive linemen very early in the season last year. And I thought they made a nice hire in Tyson Veit, luring him away from Iowa State last year. You didn't really get to see a lot of the improvement because if you lose your top 3 defensive linemen, you're pretty much just screwed. But those guys are back healthy now. I think Cincinnati's defense could take a nice step forward this year. I think Cincy can get the upset.
Listen, until Scott Satterfield gets a podcast, I've got to go for Matt Rule. Podcasters standing for podcasters. I think that he's going to be able to take care of business. Fascinated about the setting. We've got Dylan Raiola in the home of Patrick Mahomes and everything that could be coming with that. Who's going to be there? Are there any celebrity super fans of the Kansas City Chiefs that are going to be there? I don't know. There's just so much going on, and it's a great way to get started. Again, Cincinnati, Nebraska, scheduled for a 9 p.m. Eastern time kickoff in Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City. Well, coming up on the other side, we like to leave you going into each Big Ten game week with some players to watch. We'll tell you who those are and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network. We love to send you on your way into a game week with some players to watch. Bud, why don't you get us started with your player to watch in the Big Ten this week?
Chip, we're going to go to one of these standalone games. It's Nebraska receiver Dane Key coming over from Kentucky. Dylan Raiola hyped him up like crazy at Big Ten Media Day. The guy can really fly, has some serious speed on the outside for the Cornhuskers. I'm really excited to see what he can do against that Cincinnati secondary.
Chip, I was thinking about this. We had to wait, you said 30 months to see Arch Manning. We had to wait a while to see Julian Sand. We had to wait a long time to see Ty Simpson. We don't have to wait that long to see Bryce Underwood. Let me see the Michigan quarterback making his debut against New Mexico. Can't wait to see what they do around him, too. Really excited to watch the true freshman.
Well, at least we know that Bryce Underwood will be out there, because my player to watch is one that I'm wondering if we're going to watch. I'm talking about Maryland quarterback Malik Washington, another true freshman, another player with a very high ceiling, another player who's an in-state area kid. And I think that for Washington, what an opportunity it would be. FAU in year 1 of Zach Kittley could be a gettable defense right there. We don't know from Mike Loxley whether it will be him or the UCLA transfer Justin Martin, but I am buying stock in Malik Washington in the big picture. So I have got him as my player to watch because, boys, I'm hoping we get to watch him. So that's what we got right there. What we have coming for you this week on the Cover 3 podcast is going to include more big game breakdowns on Wednesday, our week 1 locks on Thursday. You can find those at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And then on Saturday night, 11:30 p.m. Eastern time, our week 1 instant reaction. So make sure you download and subscribe the Cover 3 podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and check us out, youtube.com/Cover3.